Good morning and welcome. Now, this morning we're going to look at how well traitors have actually destroyed the United Kingdom. You've got to give credit where it's due. They've done an absolutely brilliant job of it. If you wanted a blueprint on how to destroy a country, you couldn't really get better. I think we should give them awards. Looking at it from the other point of view, we have the most brilliant traitors in this country. Now, going back to the 1930s, there was a chap called Admiral Ramsay. He was a very senior person in naval intelligence. And what happened is he wrote a book, From Admiral to Cabin Boy. And in that book, he wrote about, inverted commas, the hidden hand. And what he discovered was that people started to get into high places in government in a very mysterious way. And he was no conspiracy theorist or anything like that, because I'm talking about the 1930s. And in the 1930s, naval intelligence was probably the best we had. And they had totally infiltrated the German National Socialist Party. And I don't think the National Socialists could cough unless the British naval intelligence knew about it. And they kept telling Number 10 that Germany was of no threat whatsoever to the United Kingdom. There was no plans for any aggression towards the United Kingdom at all. And when Chamberlain left office, and some people say he was killed, we will never know the truth about that. And Churchill came from a backbencher MP for Chingford and suddenly became Prime Minister. He had Admiral Ramsay and a lot of senior brass in naval intelligence put into jail for the rest of the war to shut them up. And what they were saying was not political, it was truth. And I think there's a lot of parallels what we had then to what we've got now with man-made global warming, whereas real scientists are being silenced in favour of a fake consensus. Now, going back to traitors, what I'm going to say is that I've got some notes here, so I better refer to them. Now, for example, from post-1945, Britain was the world leader in computing, supersonic aircraft design. The Miles Aircraft Company was years ahead of the Americans. Plywood technology, the list goes on. Now, Churchill ordered the computer that broke the Enigma code to be totally destroyed and all plans to be burnt. Supersonic aircraft technology was given to the Americans for free. And brilliant aircraft designers in Britain suddenly found themselves without work. Now, apart from prefab housing, plywood technology was allowed to stagnate, and where used for external house walling, which saves a heck of a lot of costs, it was sidestepped in favour of primitive, labour-intensive brickwork. Now, coming forward to the 1960s, the TSR-2 fighter jet and Blue Streak rockets, both projects were technologically years ahead of everyone else and 100% British. They were both ruthlessly cancelled during their final development stages, and prototypes and plans were ordered to be destroyed. And along with it, British expertise disappeared. Now, if such projects were allowed to continue, the spin-offs for the ordinary person in the street would have been fantastic. Now, not only for employment, but the prestige of Britain throughout the world. Now, Concorde got the go-ahead, but it was part French, and supersonic air travel was only for the elite who could afford the exorbitantly high cost of the air tickets. Nowadays, it seems only projects that are exorbitantly expensive, that are good for foreign employment, are given the go-ahead. To me, that is treason. Now, Caroline, who would you award for traitor of maybe the century, the year, or whatever? Who's your favourite traitor?
Oh, good morning, Chris. Thanks for having me on your show again. Now, there's quite a few. I mean, Tony Blair has generally got a top billing, but because I have been campaigning to leave the European Union for so long now, I would say the likes of Nigel Farage must be in the running too. Only last night, apparently, Nigel Farage was on TV at 9 o'clock saying that we were not getting Brexit. But he must have known this before Christmas when he decided, in his wisdom, not to stand in the Tory party's way and stand many people for the Brexit party in Tory held seats. It was known at that point, in actual fact, the day after the general election, there was an article produced by the Brexit Party with a long list of items which said why we were not leaving. So if you produce a list the day after the general election, that list has to be verified, spot checked, and to make sure there's no mistakes in it. So that list must have been compiled before the general election. So why, if you're serious about wanting to leave the European Union, why would you stand aside and let the Tory party in? Because, of course, now we have got a position in the UK where Boris Johnson has become a dictator alongside the Privy Council, who holds court with the Queen once a month. And in that Privy Council, I've just done a video about some of the movers and shakers in the Privy Council of some 500 odd people. And these are people they've been in Parliament, and they're they're not from any particular party, because, of course, as we know, the party system is just smokescreen and mirrors. It's meaningless. It doesn't matter. These people are puppets of the global elites. Yes. But your viewers might be interested to see or hear some of the names, including Jacob Rees-Mogg, who was mentioned in, was it the Paradise Papers? We've got Diane Abbott on there. So you've got Jacob Rees-Mogg and Diane Abbott holding court with the Queen. These are like Chatham House meetings. All these meetings, anything that's discussed cannot be, we cannot find out what they've been talking about. They are above, the Privy Council itself is above any Freedom of Information Act request. So we've got that situation. We've got Tony Blair is part of the Privy Council. The Miliband brothers are both on there too. And we've got Keith Vaz, who obviously is the disgraced Keith Vaz, passports and the sting operation with the mainstream media. We've got Oliver Letwin from 2011, who was found in the park destroying files in waste paper bins. We've got Amber Rudd, who went to Bilderberger meetings. There are lots of Bilderbergers on the list. And yet these people on the Privy Council swear an oath to uphold this country so that no foreign prince, prelate or potentate can take charge of this country. And yet so many of them are Bilderbergers, and they've already broken that oath by being a Bilderberger, as every prime minister has to be a Bilderberger. So it's about time, the British people woke up. We've got, you talk about being traitors. Well, I did a show yesterday about Huawei or Weiwei, whichever way you like to pronounce it, and HS2. So you see, you've got Boris Johnson saying he's been given all this advice not to include Huawei or Weiwei into the mix. And, he's gone against most of the advice. and they're going to be part of it. They're going to be rolling out this network. That'll be, I guess, all linked in. This is the 5G network, and then we've got HS2, which has been, I don't know, it was Jacques Delors' plan in 1993, and it's been on the UK drawing board since at least 2012, if not before. So we've had 8 years of spending money on a project which is actually an EU project. It was kicked off with an initial contribution by the EU of £30 million, which is nothing compared to the 106 billion pounds, the last estimate. In fact, I'll show, just see if I've got the details here. This is what the graph looks like. This is the HS2 graph. You can see nice little train on there. And this is the estimated costs. So along here, somewhere there, these are the costs, and you can see spiraling out of control. And then on the other side, we've got a map of hopefully somewhere Great Britain. And you can see the
please. I can't quite see Great Britain there.
Is that better?
No, if you move the map down, that's better. Yes, I can see it now. Yeah.
So basically, this is the high-speed 2 proposed network throughout Europe to the tip of North Africa.
Whoa, what's North Africa, right?
Exactly, to the tip of North Africa. What did we sign a little while ago? But we signed the UN Compact, the Migration Compact, with the Marrakesh Declaration, to bring in people from Africa. That's besides the people we've got here already who've come in very recently. So when we say about control of immigration on the TV, what control of immigration have we got? I mean, last week we only had Boris Johnson inviting the Africans. He was stood alongside Prince Harry and Liz Truss, and he had an open invitation to Africans to come and get a passport and come into the UK. And strangely, everybody's more bothered about a commemorative coin with the 31st of January 2020 on it. I mean, if this is supposed to be the Brexit, if they're doing a commemorative coin, the date should be left undated, because there is no date as yet when we do actually leave the European Union.
Spot on. And, the words, when you said about that HS2 and the rail links going down to North Africa, the words Colden Ho Kalergi playing instantly sprang to mind. But what gets me is that British prestige years ago, for instance, motor cars and things like that, were deliberately, the entire industries were completely shut down. And I think it was all planned. I really do believe it, because if you shut an industry down, let's say, for example, the steel industry. Now that happened, was it 10, 20 years ago? They closed the steel industry. And you not only got the people employed in the steel industry, you've got little businesses around it, such as shops supplying food to the people that work in the factory. You've got suppliers, etc., etc., and it goes on and on and on. So when you close something down, they'll say, "Oh, it costs so many billion." You can treble that amount with the amount of work that's been lost. And when the TSR2 project was stopped in its final stages, and it was all the plans were told them to be destroyed, and this aircraft was years ahead of anybody else. It wasn't only the people that worked in the aircraft industry, it was suppliers who had to be paid off, and they had to make mass redundancies. It was the little cafe, the little corner shop where the workers would go at lunchtimes and things like that. All these industries that these chinless wonders in Whitehall don't look at. They say, "Oh, we close that industry, it only costs 70 billion, this, that, and the other." And I think it's actually planned. I really do believe it. But when you look at this HS2, which I think is going to be a white elephant, a bit like Concorde, where it is that only the rich could afford it, and it's going to cost so much money. They've got to get their money back, so it'd be, inverted commas, privatized. So a ticket will cost a fortune, and people just have to go on slow, old-fashioned trains. But Professor Eric Laithwaite, he invented or devised the linear motor, and that was.
Can you explain to people watching what a linear motor is, please?
Linear motor is, and I'm not a scientist, and this is secondhand, please look this up on Google, but my view is that it was like two magnets opposing each other, and power was put through, and you could have a train, for example, hovering literally above a monorail, and it would shoot forward at a phenomenal speed. And the UK didn't want to know, and now Japan and China are using that technology to build trains that could go several hundred miles an hour with very little to power them. The cost in energy is very, very low. And we're building this HS2 using what I would describe as Victorian technology. You know, choo-choo trains on rails. Choo-choo trains have been on rails for couple of hundred years. So why are we using old-fashioned technology? Why aren't they using this new linear motor? Now, I hope I've explained the linear motor. I don't know too much about it, but it is basically, it's to do with magnetism, and there's no moving parts as such. It's genius. It's brilliant. So maintenance costs are very low, and you don't even need suspension because it's hovering above the air. It's a bit like a hovercraft, I suppose. You don't need suspension, and it's very, very smooth, and that's it. So it seems that we're using old technology, nothing's moving forward, and there's lots of money poured into these projects, and the people with the noses in the troughs are the directors and the managers and the senior staff, and that's not trickled down to the average person in the street. And that's happening.
Well, it's obviously, well, it is happening. It's the revolving door. I mean, the chief executive of HS2 has been earning £625,750,000 a year. And then they've already made redundancy payments for I don't know why. So they've got HS2 College based in Doncaster with, I think it's like an offshoot, a partner college down in Birmingham. So what's that about? If you've got colleges, who's training these people? Why are the chief executives paid, what, more than 4 times the Prime Minister earns? Although perhaps he doesn't deserve his money either. So it's a case of it's so scandalous, and yet we just have people just accepting the fact that HS2 is a vanity project, which I actually now dispute because I've now found out why it's being built. But I will not talk about that on this show. I will leave that for my next show, which will be part 3. So it's like the Hunger Games. Well, you know, Hollywood, they always show what's going to happen to us in a film format, whether it be a full film like the Hunger Games or whether it be something like The Simpsons, where they'll talk about Freemasonry, various little topics. And it's all about, they've got it all worked out. They've had this planned. And as you mentioned at the beginning of this show, a certain group of people have, for decades, not even decades, centuries now, come into this country, obviously can't feel affiliated to this country because they have been involved in the willful destruction of this country. And, you know, where do we go from here? We've got these sort of people who patent viruses, what do you call it? The antidote, if you like. You know, these are the people who have the fires in Australia and California. We've had hot temperatures years and years ago. We've never seen anything like what's happened in Australia. And so the Australians thought they were going to be able to go to China if the worst comes to the worst. And now look what happens. That obviously that gateway isn't open, even if they wanted to. So where will be next? I mean, we could just have, I mean, it's raining outside now. It's been quite rainy for the past few weeks. So it wouldn't take much in the UK for weather to be orchestrated shall we say, to rain and rain and rain. We've living it now, they're building more and more cities where there's more development, where there's not so much in cities. They haven't got the drainage. They've got lots of tarmac. So where does the water drain away? And of course, we haven't had the dredging in the countryside. It doesn't take an Einstein to realize what could be our fate here in the UK.
Well, they build on floodplains now. I actually worked on a project about 20 years ago that they built on a floodplain. And when you ask the question that a 5-year-old would probably ask, say, well, where's the water going to go? Oh, don't worry, blah, 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 blah. And I said, yeah, but where's the water going to go? And all he got was bovine excrement, to put it politely. And that area now is prone to flooding. So we get weather like we've had over the last couple of weeks. And it's strange, the flooding occurs around the council estates of that area. And, it's the same sort of story. But what gets me is that we've got people in Parliament. Now, supposing you and I said, OK, we're going to try and be Prime Minister. Now, let's look at what's the problem with this country. And it's a problem, it's one word. Well, that's been created by a small group of people that we're not allowed to criticise. So I won't mention the word. And it's called usury. Now, if you or I got into Parliament and you could see that the entire population and the entire country is being enslaved by this usury scam, we'd probably say something about it. And if we did say something about it, then you wouldn't last very long. It'd be it'd be political suicide.
Suicide. You might end up in a box anyway.
Well, precisely. I mean, for example, now Jeremy Corbyn. Now, I haven't really got much time for Jeremy Corbyn. I wouldn't vote for him, but and I didn't vote in the last election. But he mentioned something. He said that he's going to issue government bonds to help business. Okay, government bonds is where you sidestep the banksters. And when he said that, I thought he's signing his own political hatchet. And sure enough, within days, one moment, you notice he was the darling of the press. Jeremy's here and he's got loads of crowds. And I found it all on Facebook how marvellous Jeremy Corbyn was. He couldn't put a foot wrong. Then suddenly he mentions government bonds. And oh, crumbs, he's anti, you know what, I won't say the word. And why? Because the banks could see that was a wedge in the side, or the thorn in the side of them, because any government or anybody in power that steps away from usury, which is our enslavement, they do not get into power. And this is why I say that it's not a democracy, and the only way we get to change things is to have a government that is separate from Westminster, and whoever would rise above the everything would have to have a ring of steel around them, because you would have assassins after them, paid for by the banksters. And this is the big problem. We are not. This democracy thing is a fallacy. It's not. It's a dictatorship, and always has been, and always will be. And that's it, basically.
I mean, the thing is, you've got. I don't know if you caught my show on Saturday about Paul McCartney, that he was replaced in 1966, and of course, when you think about it logically, they need the show to continue. Yeah. They don't want any disruptions. So, this was the biggest exporter in the UK of its day, just like ABBA and Volvo in Sweden. So it was very important for the Beatles to continue. It's about money. It's about greed. And it's about illusions. All we've been told all the way through our lives, we now find is totally incorrect, even to the fact that, every church, apart from the Jewish church, goes and prays on a Sunday. But in actual fact, God's people are actually supposed to, Yahweh's people are supposed to pray on a Saturday. Somebody is always taking over the rightful place, and we're the people who are made to go and worship on a different day.
Well, yes. So have you noticed, I haven't been to London for a long time. I detest the place. I call it a cultural cesspit, and I don't wish to be insulting to anybody that lives there, and but that's my own personal view, and I'm sure there's lots of very nice people that live there, but I avoid London like the plague. But if you sit on the train now, going from Hertfordshire, going into London, and look out the window, you'll see a lot of very, very strange sculptures that are very satanic. And you go into London, there is even more very strange satanic sculptures. I mean, you look at that eyesore of the North, which is called Angel of the North. Now, to me, that is a hideous lump of junk. And they're actually putting it on calendars now. So they're getting a fake consensus. You just keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And this is what Goebbels said about the Western press. He said they just keep telling the lie over and over and over and over again, and people will accept the lie as truth. And this is what they're doing. It's a fake consensus all the time. BBC local radio. It's what are you doing to prevent climate change? Assuming that, well, the climate's always changed since the year dot, but assuming that man-made climate change is a scientific fact. It isn't. It's a cult, and that's nothing more than that. Real scientists who are not allowed on the BBC tell you it's a complete load of old nonsense, and it is a load of old nonsense.
You talk about train journeys, and I was on the train yesterday going the opposite way to London, and this was the first announcement that I'd ever come across on my train line. They said it was obviously a new train, and they said CCTV footage is now in operation for your safety on this train. So we have got brother. I mean, maybe it is a valid reason, but it also makes me, I remember now in the press the past few days, we've been talking about facial recognition cameras and technology being used in London. So for whose benefit is this facial technology being used for? Is it the establishment trying to keep tabs on dissenting adults, dissenting people? And it's even been in the EU Parliament. Is this a contravention of human rights? Yes, it is a contravention of human rights. And actually, by the way, you talk about statues. You ought to see the hideous statue, a Damien Hirst statue of a pregnant woman with part of her stomach cut away, and that's in North Devon. It's just appalling, and that's a nice seaside town where you take your children to go to the seafront, and then you'd look upwards and see something that on the face of it looks like an angel from the north, but has all the bits hanging out. It's just diabolical. That's what we've been reduced to today.
Oh, that's the one I call abortion on the beach. But there's also another one that I call, and I'm I don't give a damn. I call it Lesbians Are Us, and that's the one showing two women and a child as if that is the new modern family of two women and a child. No, a real family is man, woman, and child. And again, it's all fake consensus. And this is what is most disturbing. But I mean, if you go back in time, supposing we could get into a time machine and go back to, say, 1935 or 39 and say, what's going to happen? There's going to be a major war, and then Britain is going to be destroyed. And in the year 2020, there'll be no family as such. They'll wipe out the family unit. We'll all be surveyed by camera, etc., etc. How many people would have been keen for World War II? I very much doubt anybody would. And again, World War II was fought on a fake consensus. World War I was a fake consensus. And it's this fake consensus is how they're getting away with murder all the way through. And until people wake up and see through the fake consensus, I fear for the future. I really do, because even on a local level, there's building going on like it's going out of fashion around where I live, which was once rural, and there's a housing estate being built around where I live. And I very much, well, I don't know your area, Caroline, but I should think there's building going on where you are. And they're building these, what I call smart cities, because they're turning where I live into a very highly densely populated area when it was rural. And they get it through planning with, again, fake consensus. And I've actually videoed the planning meeting where one of the developers said, 75% of people are in full agreement of this housing project. And you're not allowed to speak. But my question would be, yes, and where do you get your figure from? Who said it's 75%? Where's your facts? I mean, I could sit here and say, did you know that 80% of robins prefer worms to bird food? I've just given you a load of BS, because I'm not an ornithologist. I don't know that, but I've just made it up. But if I wore a white coat and held my lapel and sort of looked official, do you know 80% of robins prefer worms to bird food? People would believe it, even though I've just made it up.
Me. Well, it's about propaganda. You were saying about how to come out with a fake agenda before World War One, fake agenda before World War Two, and of course we had the propaganda machine in full flow for us to join the European Union or the EEC in the first place. So, if you were a farmer, livestock around, showing what's going on. For the safety of your... I'm going to have to put my glasses on. Can you read it out?
Yeah, sure. If you were a farmer moving livestock around, you'd have CCTV showing you what's going on in the trailer too, for the safety of your investment.
Well, that's fair enough. If you had it in your trailer, then that's fair enough then, isn't it? Yes, that's a good idea. What we're talking, head of the Yorkshire National Park now
wants more new housing on parkland.
Yeah, well, it's cheap, you see, to build on parkland, isn't it? Because they've got rid of all this green belt nonsense, or that's what they would say, green belt nonsense. They're sort of building them high, stacking the shelves up, if you like, and selling them off cheap, or maybe not so cheap. You talked about smart cities. I mean, I don't live in a city or a town even that will ever, I guess, be one of those places. But, we've got a doctor's surgery that had a spare room at the top. It was a new build. Well, Prince Charles, I think, and Camilla opened it a few years ago. So that doctor's surgery obviously had a spare floor. And now the dentist surgery has moved into the top floor. So the number of people needing to park because it's not in town, it's not on a bus route. The people who need to, and of course the dentist was in town and has moved just on the outskirts of town. So you've got a lot of elderly people as well. And they've got a car park which was only just fit for purpose for the doctor's surgery. Now we've got all the dentist patients, the dental patients as well coming in, and there's no place to park. You go outside the car park, and it's all, you were saying, it's new build, and it's all high density new build now with very little garden and no garages. And of course, it's double yellows on all the roads around the area. And you would have to walk. And if you were elderly, you would find it difficult to walk down another street where there isn't a yellow line on it. So we are suffering. And it might seem like, is that a first world problem, Caroline? Well, actually, for some people who are going to the doctors, they could be in a situation where they could be in a lot of pain. They're probably maybe immobile and they cannot get in to their doctors anymore. And of course, it's been a long time since the doctors used to come out and see their patients. So this is what we are now suffering. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. of
Well,
what life is like in the UK today.
but in your council, there are change agents. I've come across one. I've actually got an email from one. And
Sorry,
now
Chris, it went off. It wasn't clear what you said. There's what in a council?
there's change agents.
Yeah.
And these change agents have been on courses on neuro-linguistic programming, the Delphi system and that type of thing. I won't go into that today. But what it is, it's basically manipulating people's way of thinking. And I've actually got an email from one of these change agents who's supposed to be, inverted commas, a conservative councillor. Well, if he's a conservative councillor, I'm Donald Duck, because where I live, it's rural. There was fields up to a couple of years ago. There was pig farms around here. There was nurseries. If you wanted to buy cucumbers or lettuces, you go up to a nursery, go in there, and they go and cut one for you and say, "Oh, here it is." That's all gone now, and they're building on all the nurseries and on what was the farmland. And when Letchworth Garden City, which was one of the first garden cities, was built in just before the First World War, the housing density was 17 dwellings per hectare. Okay, so remember, 17, 1-7. Now, in the 1960s, and this is off the top of my head, I'm not looking at notes or anything, we had the Parker Morris standards, which said that houses had to have a certain size of garden, had to have a certain area. And you notice if you look at houses that were built in the 60s, especially on council estates, the hallways are very large. And the reason why is because there's a baby boom and they needed to put large prams into the hallways. And that was all part of the design. But most of the gardens were about 60 foot in length. So you had a big open area. They tore these Parker Morris standards up in the 1970s. And now they go up to something like 50 dwellings. Now, remember, it was 17 dwellings per hectare before First World War. Then it's 50 dwellings per hectare. They're building properties near where I live, 100 dwellings per hectare. And this change agent sent me this email, which said that we, in order for Britain to survive, we've got to have mass immigration to actually, we've got highly educated people coming in from overseas, and we need them because Britain will go bankrupt without them. And during the planning meeting, this bozo said, why is the housing density so low on this estate that they're building around near where I live? It should be 150 dwellings per hectare. Now, London, the average is 100 dwellings per hectare. So you just think of the housing density of 150. So from before the First World War, we've gone from 17 to 150 dwellings.
Wow, that's dare I say, impressive statistics and impressively bad. And this is, when people say about Brexit, all they're going to get tomorrow is a coin in circulation. And what else? What else? I mean, chances are it'll rain. So any parties will get rained on because they'll engineer it that it's raining, like they've engineered it, making post offices
hard to access now.
Yes, well, yes, that's true because they're often at the back of shops now. And of course, the numbers have decreased. I know that when I was growing up, a lot of people invested in something called premium bonds. So you would buy premium bonds. I think now they're in tranches of £25 or £50. And they didn't get interest as such, but all the numbers are entered into a drawer, and you can't lose your initial investment, but you could also win £25 up to, I think it's £1 million these days. So it's a good way and a useful way of protecting your initial capital. Obviously, there's no increase, but then you're not really getting anything in the banks and building societies these days. So the premium bonds now, this is, somebody's mentioned the post office. At one time, if you wanted to take your money out of your premium bonds, you could just simply go to the post office and collect a form to do this. Of course, now, with all the way the things have changed, you have to ring I think it's probably a premium rate hotline to get the form. Everything's got to be done through the post. And I just think, all this telephone banking, if you want to access your money and IT systems go down, that's just another impediment, isn't it? It's an impediment that you can't go to the local post office anymore if you have one. And life is getting harder and harder, even to access potentially your money.
And
So if the system goes down, the financial system goes down, what will happen to the people?
And also another statistic which I've noticed, and you mentioned on a program, on another program, and that is farming. Now, in 1980, Britain was the most advanced, used the most advanced technology in farming in the world. And I remember when I was very, very young in the 70s, I went on holiday to Austria, and there was two farmers. It was a package deal holiday, something I'd never go on again. And there were two farmers, one from the Isle of Ely and the other one from Essex in Chelmsford. And they were both shocked in Austria at how primitive the farming methods were, because it was, it was very, very advanced. And the amount of food that this country can produce, I think it was something like 60 to 70% in the 1980s. And it's down to 40%, and it's dropping, and I think it's going down to about 30%. Now, something I've noticed now, if you drive around where I live, you would see cows in the field, sheep fields, you would see fields and fields of crops being grown. You go out there now, you don't see sheep in the field, you don't see cows in the field, and they're just kind of wastelands. And there's no hardly any crops being grown. There was a couple of fields near where I live where it was full of this rapeseed, which was bright yellow. For the last 2 years, it hasn't been grown. And all I can see is surveyors setting out you're going to build on these fields. So with all this mass immigration, and remember, the population of the indigenous population is actually going down because we're not having enough children. So how are we going to feed? We have to rely on the EU to have food shipped in, and the same is happening in Ireland. I often look at the Gemma O'Doherty, look at her site, and she's speaking about what's happening in Ireland, and it's exactly the same. They're not growing food. That small farms have disappeared, and they're just leaving the land to just go to waste. Why? We need food.
Oh, well, that's another thing, actually. I just had a thought, what you were saying then. Years gone by, those houses you were talking about, say, even if they weren't council, but they had the big hallways, they had the big gardens.
60s, yes.
In years gone by, there was nothing to stop you having a couple of hens in the back garden. So you would have your own eggs on tap. These days, all these modern estates, and have done for quite a few decades now, they all are covenanted. So you cannot have hens and other hens basically, and ducks in your back garden producing eggs for your breakfast, because it's classed as a health and safety concern, increasing number of rats, etc. But that was a way, if the shops shut, you would actually have some food to eat. I mean, before Christmas, I said, well, what's to stop the EU trying to starve us? Stock some tins in. How many tins can you humanly actually store, especially when you're saying there's 170 houses per hectare these days? What storage space have you got?
Well, that's right. Let's face it, communism does not allow individuality, because it's due to individuality that we went ahead with technology. Because look at the West, pardon me, we had E-type JAGs, we had very supersonic aircraft. And what did the former Soviet Union communist states have, the Travant car, which was the worst car ever produced, because it was all to do with the community, but no individuality. And this is why, have you noticed that our technology is stagnating? Okay, computers are going ahead. Yes, the powers that be want computers to go ahead because they can spy on us. But when you look at cars, trains and things like that, the technology has not advanced very much. You go back 10 years, what's the difference between cars? Go back 20 years, it's still an internal combustion engine. And electric cars are a joke because the technology is not there, because we haven't got the sort of people or the minds to actually produce proper electric cars. If we had the spirit of the Victorian age, where an inventor could invent something and it would, it would go forward, we would probably be beyond electric cars by now. This is the thing: communism stifles creativity, because creativity is individualistic.
It does, but we started off the show by talking about traitors. I think the list is quite long, and I think perhaps we should invite our audience now, as we're going to wrap up this show, because we've been on the air over 3/4 of an hour, and I know a lot of people that follow me, they say, "Oh, Caroline, your videos are too long," and I think, "Oh no, I did one yesterday for 6 minutes." So to keep our audience, on board, can they contact you and give their list of traitors? And maybe we can start with that at the beginning of next week's show, which of course will be a new chapter.
That's good. You're doing the down below. Now, I'd like to put my two. I'm biased, I know that, but I think the 2 or 3 creme de la creme of are Oliver Cromwell for reintroducing usury, Winston Churchill, and of course Ted Heath. And I always say to people, can you please give me the date, maybe the year, I don't mind, when we could vote, when we voted on multiculturalism and to go into the common market? Because there isn't a date, because nobody voted to go into the common market, which is now the EU, and nobody voted for multiculturalism. And I've got nothing against races of other people or anything like that. But I say, Edward Heath, I would put those 3 as traitors. And I think we know your ones, Caroline, don't we?
Definitely Ted Heath, that's for sure.
Definitely
yeah.
Ted Heath. Well,
anyway, Chris, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Thank you. And please join us, okay, for next week, same time?
Yeah, that's be fine.
Thank you very much. And I do apologise. I like what Living Being said here. List is too long. Yes, I would agree with him there. And I do apologise for not putting all your comments up on the screen. It's very difficult. But thank you very much for joining us, and join us again next week. And also join me and Mark Windows tomorrow at 7 o'clock in the evening. Thank you very much. And
thank you for watching. Goodbye for now.